I revealed upon my 3,000 subscriber kind of landmark, getting to that point, I was going to do a project where I was going to start a reread of Fairy Tail and Black Clover and do videos as I go through them. So the plan is, the first one will be like chapter ones. We'll do chapter one, and then I'll do, I'm thinking about doing a video on each of the, chapter one villains with Bora and Rev G, and then we'll do into kind of like that first like little mini arc. You have like Everloo and Saucy Village, and then moving in through stuff like Galuna Island, and then the first dungeon, Phantom Lord, and the Clover Capital invasion, stuff like that. And we'll do character analysis videos as we go, and I'll try and give my thoughts, the best that I can remember, to the first time that I experienced the series. So Fairy Tail first chapters. So we're gonna start here. I'm gonna do the Black Clover one right after this, and I'm gonna release some like at the exact same time. So when you're watching this, the other one should be out. But very first chapter of Fairy Tail. So way back in the day, I'll just share like a short story of what originally brought me to this series. Way back in the day, Fairy Tail, the anime had just started. There was still a weird spot for manga when it came to translations overseas, like outside of Japan, because it was all fan stuff, and at the time, I don't think Fairy Tail had much for translations into English. I mean, I could, maybe I'm wrong, but it's so far back, I don't know how I'd possibly check. But it was right after the anime came out, so I think it was in one of those spots where, because of the anime got popular, that it started to get translations. And this is back when people were like doing their doing their fan translations in like MS Paint, and everything was like 360p, and it looked really bad. But you got what you got. You just kind of dealt with it back in the manga panda days. The series started out. The thing that caught my eye initially is funny enough, like the thing that got me first gravitated, I don't know, I'm pretty sure I'm using the word right, and it just drawn me towards the series that became my favorite, was the fact that the main character had the ability to use fire magic. And fire has always been my favorite element since like way back early Pokemon days. I always thought fire was the coolest element. It was like a combination of Pokemon and Power Rangers Lost Galaxy, because Leo Corbett, like, for some reason, on top of his ranger powers, he also could like just shoot flames out of his hands and stuff, which is pretty badass. But still, that drew me towards the series. I got into it. I've mentioned before, funny enough, that the beginnings of both, Hiro Mishima, like in general, I think like he likes to take his time at the beginning and just kind of get things comfortable, and then you get to what I would consider really kind of makes it for each of the series. Like Rave Master, when they went over the in that cave, and there was I'm trying to remember exactly what it's called, the Rhapsodia ship, where Haru fought Shuda seriously for the first time. And then Fairy Tail, I think it's Phantom Lord. I think Phantom Lord is really what picked up the series. And then with right now, Eden Zero, I'd say Eden Zero is either the Sun Jewel, or it might be now. Like I enjoy the Sun Jewel, but maybe this arc will be like the big one to kind of get a lot of more people in, because there's a lot of crazy stuff happening. But I think the Sun Jewel one was dope, also a pretty good contender. But either way, the Fairy Tail video, not Eden Zero video, as it were. The chapter starts out, funny enough, that the first character that we actually see, like in the canon, because you get volume 1 cover, and you get all the openings from the digital and the physical copies, but that wasn't, the first official page is Ultir. I always thought that was pretty funny, that like Ultir is the first character to appear. And you actually get Sea Green, who we know later as Jalal. Like, this is just his thought projection. You get characters like Org. There's a bunch of people that, like, even Crawford, like, even if it's just select, getting him in the first chapter was, weird to like look back and see. It is very strange when you're so much farther ahead and you can go back and see like all this stuff. And it's not just nostalgia. It's like if you can connect stuff, like I said, like Crawford, just knowing who that is, because we didn't even see what Crawford like even looked like until Tartarus, like long after he was no longer a member of the council. Just a weird thing when you think about it. It's like you don't really get him until long later. And we get that nice spread, and I actually always really like this spread because under Nazi you can see the skull and then the letters END for N. And I always like to just kind of like when some people when they were always trying like bring up stuff like, oh, that's the author foreshadowed this from like chapter 15, and I'm like, well, yeah, well, Hiroshima foreshadowed Ethereus Natsu Dragneel from chapter 1. See, look, this E&D's got the same skull and the similar outline that he wears on his outfits. I just always thought that was funny. I mean, I don't know if it's just a coincidence or what. I'm gonna always take it that way, that it was just quite foreshadowing. Because one thing that's for sure, because I know Hiroshima didn't intend for Fairy Tail to go past volume 10 when he first started out. You know, he had a lot of big mangaka, they don't expect their series to get as big as they do, or as they ended up being. And I'd like to believe that, you know, he's got some back burner ideas that ended up just becoming like into the main series. But one thing that is for sure is he actually didn't plan originally for Natsu to become human. You actually see in the early volumes. I don't remember the end of volume 1, but it's in the end of one of the early volumes, because like Natsu originally was going to be like a fire spirit. And in the one shot of Fairy Tail, where it's not even Natsu, it's a dude named Silver. He's like the prince of like the fire spirit kingdom, and then Natsu, and what became of Natsu was just like this little horned fire dude. But I mean, we got sort of that. Anyway, it starts out. You see Natsu, like he's on the train. Obviously, we know his motion sickness issues. We get happy, and just like that first like little bit, putting in his motion sickness and getting that first little aspect, his character out of the way. There's always that weirdness when you see like the early outfits too. Like I always really like that red kind of like coat that Natsu wore. I wish he wore that more. I always really like that. And then you get introduced to Lucy, and she's like talking to some magic tool salesman dude who's just trying to sell her some stuff. And this is where she gets the Canis Minor gate key that unlocks Plu. And one thing that always like bothered me about this first one, it's not the chapter, it's some of the people. Like they would always bring up like Lucy trying to charm this dude into getting a discount. But then you always have like you got stuff like full spread Bulma, like within that, was it chapter 2 or 3 of Dragon Ball? No one ever brings that up, but Lucy just trying to like charm some old dude is somehow like crazy. She's not trying to like hey man, I'll take you out back for a discount. She's just trying to get off that little girl charm. She does look a little different in the early style, and just because I know someone was gonna end up bringing up just in that early style, I've always not agreed with the idea that Fairy Tail characters and One Piece characters look similar. Like a lot of their faces, like don't look similar. Like a lot of the way that the art in general is drawn. I think though personally, when you give it like a real kind of like look at it, and you don't look for all the parts that are different. You look for just the similarities. Definitely some of like the noodly arms that Hiroshima had early on. That I could see that, like if somebody wanted to kind of like when you have a pretty clear identifier, something like their arms, like their limbs and whatnot, just having that kind of like very out there similarity, it's something that at least you can kind of understand if someone's like, oh yeah, these look sort of similar, and okay, sure. But then you have like Lucy goes to meet Bora, who is under the name Salamander at the time. Natsu thinks that that's who he's looking for, that being Igneel. He's not thinking it too clearly in this first one. The thing though that was more interesting when thinking about this first part is because like you really think of like, oh well, Natsu, well he should have known that there was a dragon in the middle of there's not going to be a dragon in the middle of this town, and if there was, it'd be a lot more chaotic and a lot more visible. But it's when Bora goes under the name Salamander, he's under Natsu's title, the member of Fairy Tail, the infamous fire wizard Salamander. That not like when you think about it, it's like, how do they not know what Natsu looks like? I mean, Natsu is, but at the same time, he's not like Mira Jane, where he was some big model. He is a character that you would read more about. And it's not like Jason got a lot of time to meet him. And we see Jason meet Natsu way later, but it doesn't look like there was any point in time where it was like up until then. Like it was just stories of like stuff he did. So early on, like the media, like the way that the wizard kind of like knowledge and info like got around in the media in Weekly Sorcerer early on was pretty like old style. Because we see later, like they have like magic projections way more streamlined. Because we see a little bit of that during the flashback in the Tower of Heaven with like Wally and Miliana, but it becomes like a lot more like it's kind of like thought of as like a much rarer thing. And then when we see, for instance, like that part after the Mira Jane and Jenny fight, where she has to like pose nude in Weekly Sorcerer, and you have like multiple members of Blue Pegasus going with her and doing it with her for solidarity to kind of help her out, and it's like a regular thing that they've got at that point. So it's interesting when you look at the technology advancement at the same time within Fairy Tail, and just kind of like their advancements in distribution as well, because we also see stuff like when you have just like early tools, and then like right now they've got like pretty much smartphones, but they're like Lacrima that Warren invented, which is also really cool when you know who did it. It's just a really interesting world building perspective when you kind of like it's not as much as and I already mentioned One Piece, so it's easy to use One Piece. Kind of like One Piece will have a lot of like, here's a new island, here's like how they do things, and here's like the difference between them and these other islands, and how they maybe what happens on here is related to something else on another island. It's just like a lot of like small neat stuff like that. Like I said, the way that their media kind of just progresses as they're going throughout the series is really cool. But Natsu goes, he tries to, go into the middle to talk to him. And it's still funny when you think about it, but at the same time, it's, like I said, the media and their lack of actual, like, coverage on the character they're talking about. Because these girls are like, oh, you're picking on Salamander, you should be more respectful. But, I mean, that's the guy that you're actually trying to, that you're thinking of is Natsu. Like, Natsu he's rough around the edges, but he's still, even at that point, he was still a pretty credible wizard. I mean, even early on, like at the very start, Natsu he wasn't S-class, but he was above like foot soldier tier. Like he was definitely like a prominent. I think if you were thinking about like levels, maybe, or I guess like rarities, he'd be kind of like just a rare. He wouldn't be a common. I mean, maybe it would be common. Actually, no, rare. Because then after that, you probably get into like kind of like like epics and legendaries and stuff. Natsu as like a rare at the start was still pretty good, and he does have like his magic that is a little bit brought up. There was a part when the girls were talking. I don't remember if it was in the same spot. I'd have to kind of like look through the chapter because I'm just scrolling through it as I'm going through it, just remembering after reading it. But there's like there's a part when the girls are talking about how he uses forbidden magic, which is to lay in early for lost magic and whatnot. There's a good amount of early story kind of build in the first one, and I don't mean just kind of like laying it out. Like there's actually a part when they're explaining the guilds. I pulled up the panel because I figured it'd be neat to kind of just bring up and look at. There's the guilds when they're first forming, and you actually can see a guy that looks very similar to Eleftheria. And regardless if it was, I don't know if it's like this is the exact like Hiro Mishima's had Eleftheria designed from the very start. I think it's more likely that he had a character in mind who would be this kind of like, oh yeah, these are what the starting guild guys are gonna look more kind of like old traditional style, and then and then that's how kind of like Eleftheria decided to kind of like go with his design. Or if it was like he looked back and he's like, okay, this would be cool to put the design in a nice callback. Either way, it's still just a really cool small detail when you look at it. Anyway, moving forward from there, you have like Lucy just explaining stuff between the guilds, just kind of like giving information about them, and just his early stuff, like trying to find Igneo is really nice. His interactions with Lucy were really nice. I did laugh when Lucy was reading, it's like a small little chuckle when Lucy's reading Weekly Sorcerer and she's like looking up Mira Jane, and you find out Mira Jane for the first time. And obviously like early Mira Jane, like at the start of the series, she couldn't use magic because of all the stuff that happened to Lizana, so she was, being a model and a barmaid in order to pull her own weight in the guild. There's a part when Lucy's like, I wonder if she tears towns apart, like, and then when you think about it, it's like, not only obviously is she way more powerful, but this isn't like, oh yeah, stuff she does later. This right now in the story where it already is, like at the very start, Mira Jane has her magic. Mira Jane and Elfman both had their magic crippled because of stuff that happened to Lizana. But that means already the events that have for Mira Jane that Makarov ended up banning her demon Halphus form already happened. So already at this point, she's gone through that event where she destroyed a city, and then Makarov was like, "You can't use this anymore. You're not allowed to use this form anymore. It's forbidden. I'm banning Halphus. You can't use it." And I just thought that was really cool when you think about something like that. And it's just one of those ones where it's like, oh yeah, you can read a comment instead of it just being like, oh yeah, cool. Maybe that'll foreshadow something for later. It's like, no, it's already in the history that it already happened. You just don't know about it at this point in the story. Like Lucy doesn't know about it either. I just really like that. And then Bora just kind of like pops out of the bush, goes to talk to Lucy. I would be concerned that he popped out of a bush. If he walked up, then I'd be like, okay, yeah, this dude's, what is he up to? Popping out of the bush, like he's probably been there a while, creeping. But he's, he's flaunting his position, well, quote unquote position in the Fairy Tale Guild to try and get Lucy to, to come to his yacht, because he's got everyone kind of like pulling over to get all these girls on there for a party, and it's just some early game tactics, bad guy tactics. He's trying to dangle a treasure over her head and try and get her to do what he wants. And I know, bad dude early on, definitely a pretty bad dude. Natsu, like when he post eating, him and Happy are just kind of chilling, and they overhear two girls talking about the salamander and how he's a famous wizard from Fairy Tale. Just like thinking back on this scene, I would have really liked it actually better in just like the hindsight, but I guess it would have opened more questions early if Natsu was like another 30 feet away from them, just to kind of show off like Dragon Slayer enhanced senses. But at the same time, like I said, that would only really work if you wouldn't going back and reading it and knowing that. Otherwise, you like the first chapter, you'd just been like, how was he able to hear all the way over there? You would have been kind of confused, which in the idea of like the question would have been kind of useful, but I think it would have caused too much of a little bit of confusion in an early like a chapter 1. So I can kind of give that one I mean, it's better than like what I said, because mine is more of like in the hindsight of a long-time reader. So, but back on the ship, well, I guess on the ship for the first time, you have Bora just using magic to try and put wine in the mouth of Lucy through magic. And it is weird when you think about certain parts, because Lucy, she comes off a lot of, we know her as more of like she's a very intelligent character. She's much more of like a strategy-based person than like a straight power output individual. And she's a really nice girl, but we don't see a lot of times where she drinks, and I think it's just because you don't see a lot of the female leads drinking, like in a majority of the time in shonens. And I just because I've already referenced it, I'll reference it one more time just because it's there. Because somebody's gonna mention it. I've mentioned One Piece already, so it's gonna be in somebody's mind when they're watching this. I know Nami drinks. I'm aware that she drinks. She's like the top drinker in the Straw Hats. But like when you look at a lot of other female leads in shonen, like they don't drink a lot. And Lucy, like in the first chapter, was ready to drink wine, and because it's even weird later when we see her drinking. There's like that part when Fairy Tail gets back together after the Tartarus arc, like right before the Alvarez War, and Lucy like just drinks like a big pint, and I was even like looking back on that, I was just like, that was really surprising, because she's not like a drinker, and there's like the parts where she accidentally gets drunk, but she just like willingly like went into it, and she was just partying. I just really like that, because when you think about it, like at the end of the day, Lucy is an adult. She's like in her early 20s. Well, she's, oh my god, I'm trying to remember if she's 17 or 18 at the start of the series. I think she's 17 at the very start of Fairy Tail. So right now she's around 19 to 20. Just like thinking back. But, as we know, Bora, he was a liar. He was gonna, use sleep magic to put her, knock her unconscious, take her to Bosco with all the other girls in a slave trade ship. It gets really dark in the first chapter. Like, it gets really dark. And I was thinking about this when I was looking at the Black Clover chapter, when I was just thinking about, like, okay, what do I need to make sure I cover in the first chapters? And I don't want to cover it too much, because it's pretty much what I'll do the videos on for each of them, for Revchi and Bora. But, like, both of them are really, like, heavy for the first chapter. Like, just thinking of, like, the first chapter, Seven Deadly Sins, Twigo was just kind of after Elizabeth and stuff. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember 100%. But, like, Bora going to Bosco, like, he's selling women as slaves, and I think anybody can kind of guess that they would be going to sex slave trade and stuff. And then in Black Clover, like, Revchi he was going to steal this, his grimoire, and we know in Black Clover world, and, well, not everyone knows it. Tabata has said it's like a war crime. It's because their grimoires are part of them. You're pretty much ripping off something that makes them who they are, and you're destroying part of their identity, which is like a really egregious crime when you think about it. It's something that would just completely annihilate an aspect of who they are entirely. So, like, Bora, he takes Lucy's keys, throws them out. As when you're still in that spot, like, thinking, he's a bad dude, the salamander, he must be a bad guy, the Fairy Tale Guild might not be so good. But then there's the obvious question, like, if that's the case, then why is this series called Fairy Tail? Natsu shows up, we get a display of his motion sickness, like, early on. Happy showing up with his wings out. I still love this first part, because Happy even early on, like, dodging bullets was just always, like, it's pretty impressive for, like a cat, because it's a feat thing, but at the same time, it does show the consistency that Happy, though, isn't a fighter, but he is fast. He's always had speed on his side. That's one thing that, like, Happy has always been shown, is, like, as he gets stronger, like, he's not, like, going to be able to jump in and fight some big characters, but he is able to keep up with, like, a lot of bigger guys in speed. Like, him and the other Exceed, they've always been emphasized on how fast they are. That's a consistent thing throughout the entirety of the series. And then, like, Lucy goes and finds her keys. Natsu's mad, because you have somebody using the Fairy Tail Guild name. Lucy summons Aquarius. You find a little bit about just, like, Aquarius's personality early on. Throws the ship into shore, and then Natsu, he's freed from his motion sickness, gets up, and then you start finding out, like, the bigger stuff about Natsu early on, like, exactly what makes him who he is. And there's a pretty good line at the start, because Natsu, like, when the guys, like, are sent at Natsu to grab him, he's just, like, staring Bora down, like, going to look at his face, trying to get a glimpse at him. And it's interesting when you think also early on, because Bora's magic, Natsu's got magic, Lucy's got magic, Happy's got magic, but some of these thugs, like, they aren't wizards, they're just dudes. And later, like, obviously, like, the characters just start being more magic. Like, we get the Vanish brothers shortly after this, and they're not magic. Like, they have some, like, one of them has a magic tool with the frying pan, but he himself is not, like, a wizard. And it's just, like, looking back when we were still at a spot where non-magic folks were, existed in Fairy Tail. I mean, there's also, like, curses and dragons and stuff, but you know what I mean? Characters with no real powers. And we get a little bit right before the Tartarus arc with the Sun Village and the treasure hunters, but that's about it. And they weren't really, like, warm up bad guys. They weren't, like, complete, like, you guys are nothing, we can just beat you in 1 second. But it was like, okay, once we put a little bit of effort into it, you guys aren't too tough. But at the same time, it's still, like, nice to look at and be like, okay, yeah, when you really think about some of these guys, they're still able to put out an effort. And, like, this is back at the start when dudes like that were much more normal. Like, you don't really get characters with no magic anymore, or at least no powers in any way. But Natsu, after he gets a look at Bora, he's like, I've never seen you before, like, I'm Natsu from Fairy Tail. And this is, like, what lays into Natsu being a member of the main cast. You find out shortly after this that he's the actual salamander. And there's the note from a really noteworthy comment from Natsu, like, early on, that really says a lot about who he is even now. When he says that, you could be good or evil, makes no difference to me, but I'm not going to let you slander the name of Fairy Tail. Because we know that Natsu does not care whether somebody is a good guy or a bad guy. If they put any form of tarnish on the Fairy Tail name, he's got beef. That's something that Natsu's always had going on. And he at heart is a kind person. Like, he's a nice guy when it comes down to it, but he's not above, like, just, turning on somebody just because it's like, oh yeah, you call yourself a nice guy, but yeah, I'm not gonna let that shit slide. Throwing hands. He's not gonna kill him, but he's gonna teach him a lesson. And that's why I've always kind of saw Natsu as more of, like, a soft core anti-hero, because at the end of the day, like, he wants to do nice things. Like, he's more inclined to do nice things, but he's not in any way above, like, getting into, like, some more aggressive and more kind of, like, chaotic means of dealing with anybody that's, like, that talks bad about the guild. So, like, it doesn't matter if they're a member of the council or, they're nice guy Magoo or some priest of the church or something. They talk shit about the guild and he's going to want to throw hands. That's just how Natsu is. Then we get the display of him and his ability to eat fire. The whole first bit's about Slayers and they're eating their attributes, which I'm actually looking forward to talking about later in regards to Slayers eating attributes outside of their own, because I've seen a lot of misconceptions on that, and I'm not going to talk about it here because I want to save that for when we get to the video. Probably around, I'm thinking I'm going to probably do it right after, or at least during, the Tower of Heaven, when Natsu eats Aetherion, just because that is where, like, the first big instance where I can make my point. And there's also a part with Laxus later, but we'll get to that when we get to that. I don't want to talk about it right now. You get the first part, like eating fire. Like, no, fire doesn't work on Natsu. There's actually a really good part, like when he's like right after he eats it and he gets charged up. It just looks good even in kind of like a lot of like today's parts. I think it's just the way that Hiramashima drew like Natsu's muscles and stuff. And also, it just, as a side note, it is weird looking at the early scarf design where it was more of like scattered scales instead of like a consistent like layout. But then we get like one of the guys like realize that this is actually like this guy's the actual salamander. Natsu breathes fire in his older style, where it just looks like he's just breathing like a big flamethrower instead of like a mass fire cannon that will just like tear apart anything in front of it that we get later when he starts to really get strong. But there's a really nice comment from Happy when Happy's like explaining Dragon Slayer magic, and he actually calls it, like, he says it's an enchantment. And I do really like that, because it says, I mean, it gives you a little bit of information about like the base root of Slayer magic, because we find out later from Irene, who invented she invented Dragon Slayer magic, but really Slayer magic in general, because even if demon slaying, devil slaying, and god slaying are different styles, they are the same in concept. You are altering your body composition to match that of what you're trying to fight. You're becoming that which you're trying to go against, fighting fire with fire in really the sense of the idea. You're becoming a demon to fight a demon, and just how it is. And in this case, a dragon. I thought that was really cool, because we don't find out about enchantments being where Slayer magic came from until the Irene flashback. We don't get like a lot of explanation about it until way later. And this is the first part, so we know it is an enchantment. It's just really cool. I really like that looking back on it, and it gives you the first like breadcrumb on like a bigger story. It obviously comes way later. And then the chapter closes out on Natsu like grabbing Lucy and taking her off to join the Fairy Tail Guild. And we see even some stuff where members of the council, obviously they got beef with the Fairy Tail Guild. I don't really want to talk about any of those guys right now. I mean, with Seagreen and stuff, that cool, but none of them that I really want to like jump at the moment. I want to talk more about just the fun of that kind of like panel when Natsu's, or that page when Natsu's running away with Lucy, and he's like, oh, you wanted to join the Fairy Tail Guild, right? Then you can come with us. And just like them running away from the guards is the same setup that they have when Natsu and Lucy and Happy run away from them in chapter 419, right after he comes back from the year training arc, or year training piece between Tartarus and Alvarez. And there's a similar one at chapter 545 before they depart from the 100 Years quest. I always just found that really cool. I like the callback, because also volume 1 has the same volume, or not the exact same, but the same style of volume cover as I think it's volume 50. I think it's volume 50 of the series, and it's like an updated version of volume 1. I mean, I'm just trying to like pull around that area and look. I think it was well, I'm trying to remember exactly what chapter that volume starts on. I think it was like 416 or something. I'm just trying to like peer around, trying to remember before I close this out, because otherwise it's gonna bother the hell out of me. Actually, I think it's 420. I think it might be 420 that it starts out at with this volume. No, it's not. Damn it. I'm just trying to. I'll get to it. There we go. Hey, 421. Yeah, 420. Volume 50. It has a similar style, not the exact same, but just like the way that Natsu and Lucy are kind of like going off on the adventure. I really liked it. I think that's really just nostalgic in all aspects. Anyway, this has been going on for a half hour, so I'm gonna close this out. I gotta do the Black Clover one. I'm gonna hopefully be able to keep that one to around 20 minutes, because I'm still gonna have a lot to say about that. Or like I said, in hindsight, like when you really like look at stuff and then where you're able to connect early bits to stuff we got later. but obviously with not nearly as much content with Black Clover as I have with Fairy Tail. So I'm hoping if I can keep it to like 20 minutes. Anyway, other than that, comment below. Tell me your thoughts are about this, and tell me your thoughts are about this. This idea. I think this project's gonna be a lot of fun. Because like I said, I am excited to talk about stuff later on, like Slayers eating their own attributes and what happens when they don't. Anyway, other than that, though, comment below. Thumbs up the video, prefer the like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. But other than that, I appreciate everybody's already subscribed, and I thank you all for listening. Bye.